from the Good Shepherd Library here in Inwood, New York City. Welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where I meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home what we affectionately call upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome local artist Arlene Schulman. Arlene wears many hats, from writer, photographer, podcaster, and host to documentary filmmaker. Her extraordinary body of work, which ranges from photographs to films to photographic essays, illuminates facets of New York City that the majority of us never quite see. This includes boxing gyms, baseball dugouts, police officers on the beat, Holocaust survivors, an early interview with Broadway star and Inwood resident Lin-Manuel Miranda, a local look at a guidance counselor by day and drag queen at night, and her haunting film On Some Strange Mornings about a Dominican immigrant living with Alzheimer's, caring for his mother with dementia. Ms. Schulman holds a graduate degree in journalism with a focus on documentary filmmaking from Columbia's Journalism School and an undergraduate degree in English literature from CUNY Baccalaureate for Unique and Interdisciplinary Studies. We're going to talk to her about the many hats she wears, but first, let me welcome you, Arlene, to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. What an honor to be with you and to be in the company of so many great artists from the community.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been a pandemic. It's been a long time since we got to hang and talk.
Yes.
And we used to run to the street and events, and just those events are few far in between now, I think. People aren't doing as much anymore, or whatever reason, but hopefully it's coming back now, right? We're getting more things happening in the community.
More things happening in the community and around the city, both live events and virtual. And with a pandemic that really opened up this new stream of connecting with audiences and with people through Zoom and the computer.
It's nice, and you get to meet maybe you didn't meet some of your neighbors who, in person that you could meet on Zoom, and now, you can connect with them in real life and hopefully create some work, which you're doing, which I think is fantastic. But so let's go back. Everyone loves a good origin story. So is it true your first foray into art, photography exactly, began at the age of 8 in your home borough of Brooklyn?
Yes, I am a proud East New Yorker from Brooklyn, from the projects actually, from the Linden houses. But I was a kid in the 3rd grade who had a homework assignment that said, okay, here are your 10 vocabulary words, come up with a story. So I love words. I love what you can do with everything that has to do with language and words. I was a kid that came up with 5 homework assignments that were turned in, not just one. And at the same time, my father was an avid amateur photographer, quite a good one. And that was my pal in the creative world who took me to museums, who taught me how to photograph, taught me how to develop and print film, and really gave me the kick he kickstarted my creativity. And that was the beginning of my creative career, documenting people and life in New York City, and I haven't looked back.
Wow. And how great is that your dad can be kind of your mentor for you to push you along the way. And it's important to have people like that to kind of give you a little guidance, right?
Yes, and he fostered my love for museums and art galleries. I feel like I'm missing something if I'm not at the Met or the Cloisters or the Museum of Modern Art or one of the many museums around the city. And I'm now a new fan of the Poster House. Not a new fan, but recently discovered it, and I love their exhibits. I love graphic art. I love letterpress, and all of that was a push from the home life very, very early on.
And now you're influencing others with your art, so how cool is that, right?
Yes.
Very cool. So how did you find your way to Inwood?
That's a very interesting question. At one point, I was living on the Upper East Side. The rent was going up to I'm sure now it's in the 2,000
You said enough with
plus.
the Upper East Side. We get it.
Yes. I would kick my laundry up and down the stairs on a 5-story walk up, and it got to the point where it became unaffordable. So I did what everyone does: is I asked around, do you know anyone who has an apartment available? I wasn't looking for a roommate situation. I'd been through that and said, I need my own space, my creative space. Talked to this gal who I used to work with, and she had an apartment on the second floor. The third floor above her was open, came up to Inwood, and looked around and went, I didn't know where I was. But the super said, can you afford $250? That was about 35 years ago.
You're like, a day or a week or a year? Or what about that?
There was $1,000 less than what I was paying.
Amazing.
So the idea of being in a rent stabilized apartment also appealed to me, because as a creative person, as your income goes up, it goes down, it's in between, you know that it's low enough that you should, or I can always pay it.
Wow. What year was this? Do you want me asking?
This was like 35 years ago. I'm really bad at math.
It's okay. We can do the math for you.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave that to the expert here.
Exactly.
But I love the parks, the neighbors.
Yeah.
It still are. The building was well kept up, and that was. I sort of stumbled upon it. I didn't even know where it was.
Well, you've been in a very since I've known you, and I've been here for 21 years. And you guys can do the math on that too. You're actively involved in this community as long as I've been here, and I mean active, I mean like you show up to events, you've been on part of the community board, this neighborhood has been special to you. It's very obvious, and you create your art here as well, which is also very telling. So we're in a strange time, I think. So I was curious, where is Inwood to you now in your heart, and where do you see us going, artistically, as it becomes more challenging for artists to live anywhere in the city, as you can attest it to?
I find Uptown, including Washington Heights and Inwood, is a very special place for a creative person. For someone like me, who is more of an outward, I don't want to knock over the mic, is more like an outward communicator of ideas, looking for subjects, looking for people to photograph, to interview, to film, is you don't have to go very far. People are so willing to assist you, make themselves available, find someone for you. I can knock on a neighbor's door, which I have done, and my neighbor became part of a story that I worked on about a book collector with thousands of books in his apartment and in the Dominican Republic. When I was in grad school, I needed some help setting up my camera and filming someone. I knocked on my door, and my neighbor came right over, sat on the couch, and there was an interview. I find people just so willing to embrace you. I'm not sure what other neighborhood you can find that in Manhattan. And as large as we are, the neighborhood is expanding with all this, the new construction. I'm not sure where we're going to go with that familiarity and connectiveness. I would like to hope that it's still remains part of it, but it's too soon. That remains to be seen.
I agree. And the neighborhood's expanding quite a bit, so time will tell. But I agree with what you just said. Everything you said, it's like it has that very small town feel where I think the word's approachable. You feel like your neighbors are approachable. You're approachable. It's not the your eyes down on the subway. Don't make eye contact. Don't reach out and say hello. Just quite the opposite on the streets of Inwood and Washington Heights. And very much about, hey, how are you? And haven't seen you in a while. Where you been? What are you working on? You're the photographer, right? Yeah.
And yes, and I've found like over the years, like I've known the mail carriers. I know Jorge, the mail carrier. The women who are the token booth clerks at 207th Street. We know each other by name, and we'll stop and chat. Mike from the supermarket. Lauren, yes. Yeah. So from Inwood Gourmet. So you get it's an opportunity to get to know people, right. And feel like you're part of the community. Totally.
Well, speaking of being part of a community, you're a part of a very specific community I want you to talk about. You have an upcoming documentary project in the works called Keeping the Faith, Meet the Romaniotes. Is that right? Pronounce it Romaniotes?
Romaniotes.
Okay. Can you tell us about it?
Well, my grandmother and the relatives on my mother's side of the family are all from a small town in Greece called Yanina. It's about 2 to 4 hours from Athens. I'm trying to remember how long it took us by bus last year. But The focus is really on who were these people and how have they managed to survive. They're a minority of a minority of a minority. You start off with Greece, which is not overwhelmingly Jewish, but they are not Sephardic, they're not Ashkenazi, but they are another tribe of Greek Jews there. Many of them came over to the Lower East Side in the early 1900s. But as with other immigrant groups, they've assimilated. But back up just a little bit. The language is different. The food is different. The liturgy is different. There was a lot of intermarriage over the centuries to keep them together. And also they were geographically isolated from others because of their location near the Pindus Mountains and Lake Pamvodus. So it was very, very isolated. And there are many family surnames that are interconnected. I'm related to thousands of Roman Yotes because they all intermarried generations and generations ago, going back to the 2nd century. As the story goes, they were slaves on a ship traveling from Rome to Judea. I might actually have it it might actually be the other way. The ship capsized off the coast of Greece, and they made their way inland. So that's like the first of their many survival stories. Fast forward to the Lower East Side, all bets were off in terms of sustaining their culture. They had to work. The pool of people was much more limited, because they weren't in their hometown. Oh, I hear someone yelling. And they, so what they wound up doing was they now worked on the Sabbath. Women now worked out of their homes, which was forbidden as part of their culture. And they sort of eased out to a certain extent, depending on the family. I'm speaking mostly of mine. They sort of eased out and became very, very much Americanized. So my mother, may she rest in peace, would have been full Roman Yote. She married my father, who was Ashkenazi, so that makes me half. But that happened with many, many families. There are very few full Roman Yotes still around. Mm-hmm. I discovered the synagogue a number of years ago on the Lower East Side.
Still there, right?
It is still there. It is not run by Roman Yotes, though, because the last full-blooded Roman Yote had passed away maybe almost 20 years ago. So you have a smattering of people who are there and they're preserving the culture by different programming. So have kind of moved into the 21st century as well. Sometimes there is programming that is also online and in person, cooking classes. They follow the Roman Yote liturgy. Not as many Greek speakers as there used to be. So my documentary takes a look at them from who they are, the Roman Yotes, and what is the synagogue all about? How have they managed to survive? The patterns of immigration, and also being on the Lower East Side. They're technically in Chinatown. So where would you expect to find a synagogue in Chinatown?
Yeah.
It's very small, and it's surviving. It's also a story that's not only part of the Jewish faith, but many other religious denominations are also struggling to survive, where the older community has passed away, the younger community is not as religious, they don't live in the neighborhood. There's like the many distractions of modern life that people are not as interested in. There go some of the churches in Harlem, the Upper West Side.
That's life. That's New York City.
It's always changing.
It's our neighborhood. I mean, how many second, third generation people leave, and then once they go on, there's no reason for the parents to stay because they want to go where the grandkids are, right?
Yes.
And they'll leave, and so it's that's it's the cycle. But it is also sad that they do it in droves, and so you have that lack of that foundation gets chipped away at, right? Of maintaining those cultural customs. Forget about history itself, but just the oral history is the untaught stuff that is by rote in the liturgical, outside the liturgical. But it's wonderful what you're doing with this documentary, and we're thrilled to see it. And you're going to have where are you in the process right now?
I'm in the process of editing, a little bit of shooting left to do as I find gaps, because there aren't a lot of historical images, and if they are, they're very similar. So I'm trying to beef that up, and in engaging the audience with my own story is having myself filmed as well.
Yeah, because you're part of the story, right? You're
Yes.
part of that living history. So maybe an autobiographical documentary.
It has a little bit of that, but I'm more of the thread that really pushes it along. And I'm not. I didn't expect to be on camera, and I prefer not to be. But there's enough of the connective tissue sort of comes from my family, my grandmother, and in order to get them in the story, I'm in there, but lightly. Okay. It's not Arlene's story; it's theirs.
Okay. Well, we all look forward to it, and
Thank you.
You'll let us know, and hopefully we'll catch it at one of the Inwood Film Festivals.
Oh,
in the
absolutely,
forthcoming years.
yes.
Well, we look forward to it. How else do you plan to expend your artistic energy in 2024? Any photography projects in the works? Anything else we should be aware of?
I'm working on a story now. I'm a contributor on plastic slipcovers of all things, but yes, because the great aunt in the Bronx had plastic slipcovers that anyone of a certain generation will remember peeling yourself off of them like color forms. But I'm a contributing writer to Next Avenue, and that's one of the stories that I'm working on. I'm also planning, with great reluctance, I mean, it's a sad parting, but I have to do it, getting rid of my 212 landline. So I may actually, after about 35 years with the same 212 number that I've not used in years, I think I may actually have a ceremony and write about the parting of my 212.
That might be a short doc there somewhere as well, just like, I'm sure someone will pick it up for a cell phone number somewhere eventually, whatever.
But the documentary is really my focus, and that takes up so much time that I have some ideas for projects moving forward after that. But right now, I find if I subdivide myself into too many arenas, that I will lose the time and the focus. The one project, though, that I have on the back burner and that I'm really looking forward to, and it's to me is way overdue, but it everything has its time, is a project on the late, great disability advocate Edith Prentice.
He was a good friend to many of us here.
Yes, I learned a tremendous...
Force of nature.
Yes, that's an understatement. Hell on Wheels, although she argued with that title and had another word for wheels that I won't repeat here.
Let's keep it family friendly.
Yes, I will. But she's unfortunately had passed away really more in the beginning stages, but I feel like I have enough for something short to honor her.
Well, I will go on record here as well saying I knew Edith quite well from being, again, coming back what I said earlier in the podcast about, you'd see people out and about, and it's not like Edith and I hung out and had beers together. It's that we both had similar passions for community relationships and community programming, and I think Inwood Artworks mirrors in a different way her passion about access to all.
Yes.
We off camera we talked about earlier about how Inwood Artworks we're multicultural. Everyone's always welcome, no matter age or ability or disability. And so we mourn the loss of Edith, and she was a great advocate for those of all abilities, particularly those who are challenged with disability. And I know you were a close friend, and she is a great champion in you. So we look forward to that project coming about.
Thank you. And Edith is also someone I met on the community board. So it's definitely something where if you're involved, you never know who you're going to meet and how they're going to influence you, because she still does to this day.
Oh, absolutely. And we have a street naming from her as well. Yes, we had a street named after her.
Yes, that actually has it. It's named, but there's not a ceremony just yet. I'm actually working with the electeds and her family and others to set a date to have the official unveiling.
And what the street corner?
This would be 187th and Overlook.
Okay. So, folks, we'll put that on your calendar when we figure that out. A little tip of the hat to our friend Edith.
Yes.
But another tip of the hat to our friend Arlene here. Is there anything else you want to talk about we haven't covered?
Let's see. Well, how much time do we have, Aaron?
We could do the Arlene Schulman episodic podcast like I, Claudius, and do it all like just...
We could
move it out there, but you have your own podcast too, and you have a second. You embarked on a podcast of your own at one point, right?
I did. I put that on hold for both grad school and other projects. But yes, I'd like to talk about boxing.
Talk about boxing.
I was in this neighborhood, Washington Heights, little less so Inwood, even before I moved up here, because my first role as a journalist was covering boxing. And so I was living on the Upper East Side, and someone sent me up to 163rd between St. Nicholas and Amsterdam to a gym called the West Side Boxing Club. And I went, where, who, what, where is it? At first I couldn't find it because it was downstairs in a basement. And I became very good friends with the owner, and the rest of his family. And that was like the impetus to get me into the boxing game, to cover it as a sports writer and a photographer. At first, I covered it as a photographer, and then people would say, okay, so you've got these great photos. Well, what's the story? So I started contributing stories to the point where I started out with it's like an interesting trajectory. I started out with the little boxing publications. I moved up to smaller newspapers, and then I was worked for El Diario La Prensa for a couple of years. Then freelanced quite a bit for the News and the Post, and then I did some heavy freelancing for the New York Times sports section with both writing and
this is
photos.
where you kind of see the documentary kind of dovetailing into this. That it's that journalistic storytelling you have ingrained in you, right? Yes,
I would say like the overarching word for me in terms of my career would be storyteller in different forms, whether I'm interviewing someone for a podcast, whether they're on camera, whether they are for print, for digital media. I'm out there with telling those stories.
Well, we hope you continue to do that, and we look forward to seeing more of them.
Thank you.
And keep us posted, all right?
I will. Thank you so much for having me.
You betcha. So, Arlene, also, before we let you go, where can we share more of your work with people online? Do you have a home, like a website we can send people to check out your work?
My website is arlenesscratchpaper.com. Just make sure you get the 2 S's in there for the Arlene's Scratch Paper. I also have my photographs on arleneschulman.com.
Okay. So, folks, you have your marching orders. Go check out Arlene's work
Thank
there.
you.
And, talk to her. See if you can get a story going, all right?
Yes, I'm open to hearing people's stories. You never know what's going to hit.
She's very approachable. See? Yeah. It's easy. Well, thank you again, Arlene, for
being a guest. Thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you, and the best of luck.
Oh, thank you so much. So this is Inwood Artworks On Air, an Artist Spotlight edition, where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. 5 stars. It really does help.
10
stars. just keep voting. Many thanks to the Church of Good Shepherd here for hosting us, and to HideSites.com for uptown promotional support. And you can support On Air and all of our programming by making a tax-free donation to inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. Be sure to follow us on social media, keep up with what we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Artworks On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, and our programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. From top Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Artworks On Air.